Ladies and gentlemen, today we're gonna be taking a look at a champion that probably deserves the why nobody plays title, but because he barely fits into that category, we're actually having him in this one. And that champion, of course, it's in the title, it's in the thumbnail. That is the Destroyer. An absolute menace on defense, especially when he's awakened. And I feel like he's an interesting champion to cover, not only because I took him to rank 3, but because he's a perfect example of a champion sort of being left in the dust, which we will get into a little bit later. But for now, let's actually go over all of his abilities first, and then later on discuss why you should play him, or it.
Пацаны, а часики тикают, они, блядь, не стоят. Воровская жизнь нелегкая.
The Destroyer is immune to slow, armor break, poison, bleed, infuriate as well as intimidate effects, and he actually disables the salve as well as willpower mastery. All of his attacks destroy indestructible as well as immortality buffs on the opponent, replacing them with a rubble buff lasting for 15 seconds, which basically does nothing. Whenever the opponent gains a buff while hitting into the Destroyer's block, he destroys one of their newest buffs and replaces it with a rubble buff instead. When he dashes towards the opponent with a medium attack, he actually goes unstoppable, and this goes away after 0.5 seconds, which goes on cooldown if he's actually hit while he's unstoppable for 15 seconds or until the opponent gains 3 buffs. While the opponent has an active buff, he gains a protection passive reducing damage taken by 5% for each buff up to a max of 5 buffs. As for his destruction charges, which the max stacks of these that he can have is 100, he gains 2 whenever his armor break immunity is triggered, when the opponent gains a buff or fails to gain a buff due to the immunity. Sadly, he can only gain these charges from buff immunity every 1.5 seconds, which makes me sad that they limited him like this, while they pretty much just went wild with Absman. He gains 5 destruction charges whenever he intercepts the opponent, punishing their heavy attack or their special attack. Whenever he's inflicted with a non-damaging debuff other than the stun, he then loses 1 charge, and whenever he reaches 25 charges, which is 25, 50, 75 as well as 100, he then gains a Fury passive, granting him a large amount of attack rating for 20 seconds, and these passives refresh on his special 3 or when the opponent is knocked down, with these Furies maxing out at 4 stacks. Whenever he reaches 100 destruction charges, he consumes all of them to then gain a power gain passive, granting him 4 bars of power for 10 seconds, and while this power gain is active, he can't actually gain destruction charges. But moving on to his special attacks, the special 1. Each hit of the attack grants him 10 destruction charges on hit if it's thrown into the block or if it actually misses. If the opponent dodges this attack with a dexterity mastery, however, no charges will be gained, and as a defender, he gains 15 charges instead. The final hit of this special attack is also unblockable, and it inflicts a non-stacking hinder debuff for 75% potency, lasting for 20 seconds, which reduces the potency of future buffs that will be on the opponent, and if the opponent is against the wall, all of its hits will actually be unblockable. The special 2. The first hit pauses any degeneration effects for 10 seconds, and the final 3 hits of this attack are passively unblockable. The final hit will deal a burst of direct damage, which is pretty much an insta-kill if you don't actually dex it, and the burst of damage is increased by 200% if the opponent is suffering from a degeneration. And last but not least, the special 3. It inflicts a degen passive, dealing a certain amount of direct damage over 15 seconds, and he'll actually be granted a non-stacking energized passive, which increases his combat power rate for 10 seconds with a 33% potency and is actually paused during his special attacks. While this energize is active, he can throw the special 3 again, and his special 1 and 2 will grant no power to the opponent. It also grants him an unblockable buff for 6 seconds, but moving on to his awakened ability. His personal power gain will actually pause while he's at 3 bars of power, and while the power gain is still active, his special 3 damage will actually be increased by a certain amount. His protection passives will also gain an increase in potency per buff, and whenever he's struck, he'll inflict an instant rupture, dealing 40% of the damage that was actually prevented, by his protection as physical damage to a max of 2400 damage. This rupture also destroys indestructible as well as immortality buffs, but that is pretty much it for all of his abilities. As for how you should play him, it's kind of like Absman but a little bit more simple. As soon as you start the fight, you pretty much just try to intercept the opponent as much as possible, because once you do so, you actually gain 5 destruction charges. You can also just take the safe approach and simply just spam special ones in order to gain destruction charges that way, since the AI might not actually play in your favor. Now once you reach 25, 50, 75 as well as 100 destruction charges, you will be gaining fury passives which increase your attack rating by a lot, but they do go away pretty fast, so you pretty much just want to be knocking the opponent down, whether it's with the heavy attacks, whether it's with the special attacks, just to kinda keep having them up. Now as soon as he reaches 100 of his destruction charges, you pretty much want to already be at 2 bars of power or so, just so that once the power gain hits, then you pretty much have enough power for 2 whole special 2s, with the degen, which will of course deal a lot more damage. As soon as he reaches 3 bars of power, then you launch the special 3 immediately, unless he's duped because that power gain will actually be paused. Now after throwing the special 3, you pretty much just go straight to the SP2, throw it and see the gallon amounts of damage that he actually does. And once his power gain is actually gone, you pretty much just repeat the cycle, except your fury buffs will still be there. Pretty simple as to how you should play him, and a pretty simple kit at that, though my only gripe is that his rotation doesn't really feel too smooth. Like once you gain the power gain and you actually have to start over again, it just doesn't really feel the best. But anyways, on to this man's attire and I know y'all see the drip, man. Come on now. Oh my goodness. Now I might be biased about this because I gave Deadpool I think a 6 or 7, even though his fit is absolutely simplistic. But when it comes to this one, it's even more simple, but he somehow just pulls it off, man. Spikes all around the leg side as well as the arms, the super jacked physique even though he's a suit of armor, which makes you wonder why they didn't make it look skinny, but eh. And my favorite touch is that at the back, you kinda have this part which just, oh my goodness. Now I know he's not a person, he's fire or something, or I'm not sure why he glows up so much, but that has to be the coolest things that they gave a champion in the game. When you hold his heavy attack, he starts to steam up and like, and the special 2, that sound is just so satisfying to hear. Now I'm definitely biased, I even have the man at rank 3, so this rating, you kinda might look at me funny for this one, but I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10. Only missing 1 point cause that's all there is, and I don't think there's any perfect outfit in the game. The only one that does come close is maybe Box, Scorpion, and maybe Drax or something. But anyways, on to the topic of why you should play him. And contrary to that, I don't think you should play him at all. But hear me out for a second. The Destroyer is an absolutely phenomenal champion. He can handle buffs pretty well. His damage is absolutely insane. But the biggest problem with him is that he's a champion that you pick second. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you're taking a fight where you need a lot of fast damage, then you're never gonna pick him unless maybe it's Battlegrounds or something. If it's a utility heavy fight, you might consider him, but we kinda have champions like Absman that's pretty much just a go-to. And so if none of these champions are available or you don't want to use them at all, then you'll definitely be picking the Destroyer, which is pretty much just the nature of this game, but I don't think he's bad at all. And I will make a future video sort of discussing this, as well as how good champions get labeled as mid. But just to summarize, he's basically a side champion. As an attacker, he most definitely is, but on defense, I think he's actually one of the best in the game right now. His ability to instant rupture the opponent as if he's Korg or something, as well as the power gain if you let it go out of control, he can definitely be a menace, and if things go wrong, then you're pretty much just going to die. When it comes to his value as an attacker, it is still there, but I kinda don't like how they made it so that he takes a lot more intercepts to actually ramp up. Especially when compared to a champion like Absman, him gaining 5 charges for intercepting is kind of not that great. Makes his ramp a lot slower in my opinion, and almost makes him feel like a different champion when he's facing champions that don't have a lot of buffs versus champions that actually do have a lot of them. Like I mentioned before, he's pretty much just a perfect showcase of how Kabam sort of leaves a champion in the past, because the Destroyer's whole kit, his whole abilities and all that, he was pretty much designed and made to counter champions like Hercules as well as Hulkman. After his release, Kabam has sort of shifted from these buff heavy champions with indestructible and immortality that can actually be dealt with. So now if you try to bring him against any of the newer meta champions, he's not gonna be feeling as great as he once was. Once again, this does not mean he's a bad champion at all. It's pretty much just me wondering why Kabam releases champions that do certain things, create a counter for them, and then those champions pretty much just get left behind. Other than that, I still think the Destroyer is a phenomenal champion, and the proof of that is that I literally took him straight to rank 3. His damage is amazing, not that much in short-term fights, but more so in medium to longer fights. His utility is also very wide-ranged, making him feel like an absolute tank, and so if you do have him in your roster, I would encourage you to check him out just to see if you might actually like him. But that's pretty much it for the Destroyer. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think of him. Make sure to join my Discord group, the link will be down in the description. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!